Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody, to Blurred Lines 2.0 and Intersection of Design and Business. Sorry here. All right. So please welcome again. We're going to put a spotlight on the critical cross-functional roles that design and business play together. And we've got some wonderful speakers here for you today. Mackenzie Shaw from McDougald Research, Path Robotics, Chris Brown, and Leah Stewart from Newell Brands. Okay, so quick itinerary. We're just going to spend a few minutes here on the introductions. Then we'll get into the speakers. And then towards the end, we will end with a Q&A and then closing remarks. So just some housekeeping here. All your microphones will be muted during the speaker portion of the event. Towards the end, if you'd like to be unmuted to ask a question, we will try to allow that. But in the meantime, please use the chat for any questions or comments, and we will be sure to elevate those to the panelists toward the end. This session will also be recorded for later viewing, so we will send you a link in an email later on. Okay.
Awesome. Can you see me? Can you hear me? Awesome. Hey, everybody. I'm Monica Tourneau. I am the chair of the Columbus chapter, which we'll get into a little bit, but we just wanted to kind of introduce you guys to the overall format of what we're trying to do across all the chapters right now. So as some of you may know, there are 33 chapters for IDSA, and each chapter is kind of responsible for hosting their own events and for putting on different events throughout the year, professional and everything. So what we're trying to do is kind of make that really easy for people as attendees to view the events and for chapters to kind of host events. So we're cross-collaborating across all of the chapters throughout the series. And we're putting together this series where we are dedicating every Thursday, the first Thursday of every month, we're going to be hosting an event. So each chapter will kind of have a spotlight, or they might partner together for an event. So as you're seeing right now, this is the Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati chapters combined to do this first Thursday for our second series that we've done so far for this event. So keep an eye out, because again, first Thursday of every month, we're promising to put together some sort of event or putting that on each one of the chapters to put together an event for each Thursday of every month. So coming up next will be in June 3rd, and that will be IDSA Denver's chapter hosting an event. It's supposed to be amazing. Followed by July 1st, which will be Seattle hosting an event. So you'll start to see more and more events coming out every Thursday. So just keep an eye out through IDSA National and each one of the individual chapters. So just wanted to kind of give you guys a heads up. If you see that IDSA cross collaboration series logo and kind of this gradient, it comes from all the chapters combining together to create this effort and kind of streamline and share resources and share knowledge across what we are all doing throughout design. So stay tuned for that, and thank you guys for joining us tonight. Back to you, Joanna.
All right. Okay, so I just want to do some introductions of the chapter officers. We're going to start with Cleveland. I am Joanna Celestina. I'm the chapter chair of IDSA Cleveland, and I'm currently an industrial designer at Energizer. And Scott? Oh, you're muted.
I'm the vice chair of Cleveland chapter, and I work at the Metcalf Group.
Yep. And then we also have Jason Simeon, who is also a vice chair, and he works at Moen. And then we have Kristen Brinza, who is the social outreach coordinator and student relations coordinator. And she is an industrial designer at Neon Carrot here in Cleveland as well.
Oh, hey there again. As we said, I'm the Columbus chair chapter, and with my cohort, Romina Barrera. I think Romina's on too. Romina, you there?
Oh, sorry, she's in as an attendee, but we appreciate the recognition.
Yes, Romina's a fantastic designer within UI UX and working with strategy with AEP Charge. So she's an amazing person. Definitely reach out to her, and I'm here for you guys for anything too.
All right, my name is Katerina Rizzoni. I'm the chair of the Cincinnati chapter. I also had support from Rance Pritchard, our vice chair, and Alex Majot, our secretary treasurer. And we also had a new volunteer join us partway through the session. Her name's Haley Richreed, and she's an attendee with us as well today. So we appreciate all of her help in setting this event up, but we're glad to be part of such a great collaboration. Thanks for coming, folks.
All right, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers yet again. We're first going to hear from Mackenzie Shaw from McDougald Research, and then after that, we'll have Chris Brown speak, and then last but not least, Leah Stewart. So please enjoy, and please, like I said, just if you have any questions, please put it in the chat.
Okay, let's do this. Okay, can everybody, is this showing up okay? Great.
Looks good.
Okay, so thank you guys, Cincinnati, Cleveland, and Columbus for inviting me today. I actually think it's awesome that you guys are trying to do this, you know, across all of these chapters. It's really cool to see how IDSA has kind of come so far in, you know, however many years, which we won't talk about too many years. So just a little bit first about me. So quick overview. This is my family, 9-year-old boy. We spend a majority of our time outdoors, trying to travel as much as we can. And now with a work from anywhere type of work environment, that is awesome. The other picture here is I spend a lot of time focusing on an event in Columbus called Pelotonia, which is an organization that raises money for cancer research. And now my entire family rides, which is really cool. So I'm beginning to prepare for a 100-mile bike ride later this year. In my free time, I host a music festival on our family farm in the Hocking Hills. And this picture is from what is called the Duck Creek Log Jam. That unfortunately was canceled last year and this year, but we are now creating a new one called the Hocking Hills Music Festival this fall. So if you're interested, you should totally check it out. Not yet though, because we're way behind and my website does not even exist, but we're working on it. And then this actually is an image that I had for another presentation a while ago, but mainly just representing that not only was I working full-time last year, but then I also became a homeschool teacher to my son, which was quite interesting, but we're all here and I've survived. So it's great. I like to think that my background in design and problem solving has helped, especially with this music festival thing and homeschool. So a quick background from my career, I guess. Sometimes I forget that I actually come from, my degree is industrial design from Ohio State years ago. I haven't specifically been a designer for quite a while, but I spent some time early at P&G and at Nestle as a package designer, and then spent many years at Sonic Rim, which is a design research agency, which really gave me the opportunity to travel the world, do research in people's homes in Shanghai, in Egypt, in South Africa. So I guess, you know, my advice there is do the traveling while you're young because it's awesome. And I'm so fortunate to have had that experience. And then I spent quite a few years in the corporate side of things and joined Nationwide, where I ended up leading a design research and experience strategy team. Spent about a year at Huntington, more so in kind of being the conduit between all of the entities that own any kind of customer insight, and recently returned to the agency world with McDougald Research, who some of you might be familiar with Leah McDougald. She's done some speaking through IDSA, but I had actually hired McDougald many times while working at Nationwide and just happened to come across a great opportunity to get back into the agency side and really kind of figure out how to help from a strategy perspective deliver insights to a lot of these corporate entities that I had worked in before. So all of that to really say that I've really had a lot of titles, from industrial designer, design manager, different types of research, design research, UX research. You know, when I graduated as industrial designer, there was no user experience role. There wasn't a degree at the time. There wasn't a design research degree at the time. So it's obviously kind of fascinating to see where design goes and how it changes over time. And I think there's a lot of opportunity moving forward too. But so you can see lots of different titles. Now I'm really, though my title is Director of CX and Strategy, it is admittedly one we kind of made up, but it's really now more that I'm doing a lot more client services, business operations, design operations. So this whole connecting or intersection of business and design is basically my life today. That's what I do. So all of these titles all had one foundation really, which is having empathy for and an understanding of the needs and expectations of all the humans involved in whatever the project is. So whether that is the end user that is going to use the thing, and I put this, I'm not a fan of the term user because I think it's more than a user. It's just a simple way to say it. But so, you know, there's a lot to be said about the customer and the person that's going to use the thing or the service. But there are also business stakeholders involved in all of these projects and all of these decisions, which is really important to keep in mind from the beginning of whatever you're doing. And in my day-to-day world, that is what I'm spending a lot of time on. So a bit of a starting from the beginning, which is kind of what it's like in the real world. So this is something I've learned through experience, and it's not something that I learned really in school. But I think it is so important to understand and acknowledge and can help any designer kind of be prepared for this, but also really make an impact in the business and how things move forward. So basically any company should, but most do, have a mission and a vision statement and something that they work towards as a culture, as a company, their values. And each of those things, every year, you know, there are new business goals. Sometimes they carry over. Sometimes they're lofty goals, like by the year 2025, we're going to do X, Y, and Z. I remember when it was by 2020, we're going to do whatever. And not all of those things come to fruition. But back then, that was like forever, forever away. And so each of those business goals, typically there are projects each year, new projects that come about to support all of these business goals that, again, are aligning up to the bigger mission and vision of the company. And business cases get written and approved to fund these projects, a lot of times based on how well they proved that they will meet some business goals. And so then research and design, you know, I'm currently coming from a research perspective, but it's all very similar and it works very similar. But a lot of times these project teams, approved projects, come to the research and design team and say, hey, okay, I need a thing. And sometimes it's very reactive. And that's changing, which is what I'm going to talk about. But a lot of times it's still very reactive, where, you know, literally a team will come and say, hey, I need you to design this thing because we got this approved and it's going to launch in, you know, whatever I promised August. So there is a lot of reactiveness in this. However, this is changing, and more often now, and in more mature businesses who fund and invest in and think about design, and I'll get into this a little bit more, but they are proactively including research and design to help influence these projects, to help influence business cases. And, you know, research and design can do a lot of work up front before there is a thing, before there is even the final idea to be launched, to help prove that this is worth funding or things like that. So, however, like I said before, this doesn't happen everywhere. I know that there was a question that had been asked around chief design officers in companies. And if there's a chief design officer, is this even a problem? The reality is very few companies have a chief design officer. And when they do, that's great, because that person is at the table when a lot of these bigger business goals hopefully are being determined. However, they're not typically interacting with these little project teams down here at the bottom. And so you still are working with project teams who have to understand the value that design and research can bring to the table, because they are the ones that are responsible for activating this project, finishing this project. So there's a lot to be said about, there's a top-down organizational structure of the world of design, and there's a grassroots effort that oftentimes comes from the design and research team educating these project teams so that they start to involve them sooner. And I'll get into some more of this stuff as well. You'll also see, not only will you start to see more design leaders in like leadership positions, but you'll also see corporations now, businesses, including design thinking training, which really, in order to be a really design focused company, it does take money and investment, but it also takes a change in the entire culture. And by adding in some of that training, that's really going to help, but there's a long way to go. So if you haven't seen this Venn diagram yet, you'll probably see it for the rest of your career in many things. So whether it's user experience, design, research, whatever it is, success for this space is really when you can find the overlap between the user and customer needs, the business needs, and the technical feasibility. So nothing can get made if it's not possible or if it's too expensive. The customer need is obviously very important, and that's a voice that we all have as researchers and designers, but the business is also trying to accomplish something too. And that is the case whether it's a big corporation, it's a small company, or you're starting your own. I mean, there is a business need also when you are wanting to start your own company. So you might be thinking though, but I'm a designer, I don't have an MBA, I don't want to get an MBA, I don't want to be in the business, which is totally fine. I don't have an MBA, and designers can make a big impact. And I think that is something that designers should feel excited about, that you have an opportunity to help educate and create impact in some of these companies. Of course, that's not working. So, because designers are problem solvers, we all know that. That's what we do. We solve problems. We're storytellers. It's also what we do. We don't get the luxury of saying, hey, we came up with this thing because I like it. Models got smashed if that was the conversation in design school. So we don't do that. We are telling a story, and we are trying to involve the customer point of view in that story. And we're customer advocates because, well, we've already talked about that. However, designers can also be facilitators. A lot of times you're going to be on teams with other business people. You might be on innovation pods or client teams. And as a designer, sometimes you're looked to be the facilitator of the conversation because, maybe you've moderated some interviews, or you can facilitate and ask questions while you sketch. There are lots of different ways that this comes to fruition, but a lot of time a designer or a researcher is looked at as a facilitator. So at the same time, you're dot connectors and connecting the dots across, everybody's desires or customers' needs, or even between different wants or needs or expectations in your team. And alignment builders, meaning you might be working with people from all across the company, and it might be up to you to help build that alignment. Now, the biggest challenge with that is each of these people, and sometimes in these corporations and companies, and whether it's a big company like a Nationwide or a small company, there are different levels of people. There are different parts of the organization that these people might be a part of, all who have a little bit of different needs. They all might be working towards the same goal, but they are maybe being incentivized differently, or their goals are different for their individual teams, or they care about something differently. And so it's really important to acknowledge that you might have to have conversations about the same thing in a slightly different way, depending on who the person is or what level they are, which impacts a lot of things like your deliverables. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So how do you do that? As a designer, how do you try to facilitate conversations across such a variety of people? And really, it's about asking questions. I would say I ask more questions than anything these days. I've been told I ask too many questions. However, the reality is all of these questions are going to help shape your project. They're going to help shape what resources should be on a project. They might impact a research approach. Should we do discovery? There are questions here like, who are the stakeholders in this project? Well, if they are across multiple disciplines or multiple business units, it's super valuable to start with some discovery interviews with these stakeholders to understand what they expect out of this or what they expect to do with the outcome. One of the key questions I ask all the time is, what does success look like? I've asked this question before after even having multiple conversations with the client, and not until we asked it in this way did we uncover that they actually they have some ideas, they have some concepts that they want to get run by people because they're on the hook for adding this new feature to their website. But this was not even a part of the ask. The ask was, how do we provide more leads to our agents? So really asking many questions to help guide your approach, your involvement, your timeline, what milestones are coming up. Maybe they have a presentation to the board of directors. What information do they need to share? Maybe there is, I don't know, there are big meetings, random meetings that corporate people have, and they, sometimes they care about different parts of your project. And when you think about too, what problem are you trying to solve or what are you going to do with these results really drives what your deliverable is. If it is expected that, for example, this thing is going to be launched on August 1st, whatever that is, well, then there's not a whole lot of time to find out if it's a good idea, for example. We better have some concepts and we better be getting some feedback on concepts. So as funny as it is, if you've worked in corporate America, then you understand that a lot of things in corporate America become acronyms, and you'll be very confused for a long time because there's so many acronyms. But this acronym, when I heard this years ago called WITHM, I just thought, it was so ridiculous. WITHM, really, like, that's what we're saying. But the reality is, it stands in what's in it for me, but essentially what's in it for them. And if you can always kind of keep this in mind of what's in it for them, what's in it for, excuse me, what does the business care about? Do they care about money? Is it all about cutting costs? Is it all about getting more customers with more money? What are they being measured on? What do they care about? And how can you help them accomplish that goal? A lot of showing that you understand what they care about and helping them be successful in turn helps to show them how design can be valuable to what they do, which eventually or in turn then means they're going to start including you sooner, and they will reach out to, hopefully design and research even sooner. So this is the key acronym to remember. It's so ridiculous, but just one quick example, and I've probably said some of these things, but through some early conversations, a lot of times we have clients come to us and a lot of our first questions are, well, why is this even an idea? How did you get here? What problem are you solving? And hopefully they have some good story about how they got here, and it's based on research, of course, and it's a great thing. But through some early conversations recently with the client, we had learned that the product team had already decided that they were launching this new feature. It wasn't a question of is it a good idea anymore? A business case was approved and there was a date that this thing was going to happen. And so, you know, that really shifted our conversation and our research plan, and also ultimately what concepts and how we were working with the design team of, again, it's not if it's a good idea, it is how then do we communicate this idea? How do we do this effectively to different audiences? How do we build trust? How do we maintain the trust? And then how is this going to come to life in a digital space for this example? But had we not asked those questions and we were presented with, hey, we have this concept, our first thought is, well, is it even a good idea? Maybe we should go find out if it's a good idea. So asking a lot of questions early is really important. So this is the copy of the Harvard Business Review, and actually it's from September of 2015. And when this came out, I was at Nationwide, and it was such a big deal because it was kind of validating the work we'd been doing for years. And it was also proving, and I think helped to prove our leadership at Nationwide, that design thinking is real. Now you've just put a name to it. Design is a thing. It should be a part of business. Let's go. Like, what are we going to do about this? And the reality is that was in 2015 and it's 2021. And it's not all the way figured out at Nationwide. It's not all the way figured out anywhere I've been, but it's getting there and it's getting better. And I think designers, and whether you're on a UX team or a design team, a marketing team, whatever, we really have an opportunity to help educate our clients and the people we work with, whether it's, you know, internal or external, of about how design can help them solve their business problems. And again, you know, I said companies are starting to train on design thinking, and there's the D school, and it's, you know, a big deal. But internally, we can do similar things. And it really starts by asking questions. And even if you feel like, you know, you're not in a position to ask leadership these questions, or you're not in the day-to-day client meetings, you can still ask the questions. You can ask your team, you can ask your manager, you can ask an account manager or whoever brought the work to you. And if you want to start your own business, ask yourself the same questions. What problem are you trying to solve, and what does success look like? It'll really, I think, help set you up for success, both as designers and the business team as a whole. Of course, you know, there's always kind of a right and a wrong time to ask these questions, or in a right way. Like sometimes, like in certain leadership situations, you probably don't ask the questions, but that's a whole other talk. So my main statement of this talk is I truly believe, and I've lived through and see, that there is no successful research or design without business. And the better you can understand the business, the more successful your research and design can be. So again, I just encourage you to feel confident in asking the questions, be okay being the person who asks too many questions, because it will really set you up better in the long run. And that is that. I did not watch my time, so I hope that's okay.
You're right on time. That's perfect, Mackenzie. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
This was a great presentation, and it really spoke to me that, you know, it doesn't take just designers. You have to really understand who all your stakeholders are. You have the users, you have the engineers, you have the business partners, marketing, sales, et cetera, and you all have to work together to create a successful product. So I think that was really impactful. I really liked your point on asking questions and asking them early, and knowing who to ask them for, and not being afraid of being that annoying person, to really understand the project and what's at stake. So thank you so much. And next we will be having Chris Brown speak, and he is currently at Path Robotics. So Chris, take it away.
Thanks, Joanna, and thanks, Mackenzie. It's a fun spot to follow you, because that was an amazing talk. And you know, one of the things that we talked about prepping for this is that there's going to be a lot of common threads, a lot of common themes from the three different speakers that you'll hear from today. So you know, just on a high level, who I am. So I'm, father of two. I've got 2 dogs, beautiful wife that got married in 2012. I have a background in industrial design. I got my degree from Ohio State University several years back. Mackenzie, saying that models are smashed does somewhat bait the type of professor that was there at that time. I think I know who you're talking about, but yeah, I mean, so what I want to focus on and hopefully deliver for all of you that are here on this Zoom with us is, just some of the things that I've picked up along the way in my journey through design education, through my career in early design practitioner, shifting into operations, shifting into sales, owning my own business, and what are those things that I learned as far as effectively working with cross-functional teams and leading cross-functional teams eventually. So, the way that I want to do that is I'll give you a step-by-step, play-by-play of what my career has looked like. So graduating from Ohio State University, I ended up getting my first job as a design sales manager. How exciting is that? It's got design and manager in that title all at once. Did that job for a year. It was for a company called Interior Dunnage Specialties. We made returnable and recyclable packaging for the American manufacturing industry. So those packages that deliver parts from one plant to another, that's what we were doing. And I had a lot of fun doing that. Got to practice a lot of my design skills that I learned in school. But then when I got to about 12 months in, quota became a much bigger and louder word for me. So I decided, I need to shift gears and reached out to my network and found an opportunity to join a local design company as a design researcher. And my specific role in the company was Trident Design. So we worked with inventors, we worked with corporations to identify opportunities for IP that they had already developed, they were thinking of developing, and IP is intellectual property, so patents, for those that maybe don't know that yet. And so as the design researcher for this company, most of my role was in validating that there was an opportunity, right? Should this even be something explored? And the way that I would do that is diving into the patent landscape, diving into the market landscape, and getting a good sense, red, yellow, green, is there an opportunity here? Very exciting, very fulfilling role to be a part of, and getting to talk to these clients early in the process really started to get me exposed and engaged with some of those other key members in the company that were from sales, from operations leadership, and getting me, exposed, like I said before, but, engaged in different areas of the business. And I started to fall in love with that cross-functional experience. And so that led me to opportunities that, one, I became the project manager. So managing projects, not managing people. And eventually I started managing people, managing the team for Trident, and was the design manager there for about 3.5 years. And during that, and I'll dive into some more details later about what I learned. But, one of the biggest learnings about stepping up through that process, and I don't know if anybody else on the call has experienced this, but you eventually become a manager of your friends, a manager of your colleagues that you went to school with, that you have maybe less experience than, and being able to find ways to break through that is incredibly important. So at a certain point, I felt like there was an opportunity for me to grow, for me to add more value, for me to, build additional areas where I can add value in the business, and took on the role of sales director. And I was sales director for Trident Design for about a year, a little less than a year. And then I became president of the company there for 2 years. And it was an exhilarating and fun ride as the president of a design firm. And it was my dream, right? It was, wow, I could run my own design studio. That would be so fun and so great. But there's a lot that comes with that type of responsibility, and titles really don't mean much when you're taking that on. But after a couple of years at that, I had an opportunity to join Design Central, one of those companies that when you're in school, you're like, that would be amazing. I want to join a team like Design Central. They have been running a business as long as I've been walking. Like, how much can I possibly learn? How much can I add value there? So I joined their team as a business developer and got to work with some of the, experienced team members that had a lot to imbue on me and some frustrations of what the world is like. And actually, I think I forgot to even put in here was all of my involvement in IDSA and being that conduit between those different businesses and IDSA at the time, and hearing some frustrations, and love seeing, like Mackenzie said, all the improvements and the ways that our IDSA chapters have evolved and become more robust. It's just very exciting to see. But then also, while I was working at Design Central, like many others at Design Central, I had another business that I was running. So my wife and I had opened up a play cafe. And so for those of you that don't know what that is, it's, half independent coffee shop, half play area for kids that's supervised so that parents can come, get some work done, and then the kids can be supervised in the play area. So, like a nice Starbucks version of a, discovery zone. I guess maybe that's dating me as well. But so that was something else that gave me a lot of learnings. And then my current role at Path Robotics, I'm an account executive. So, where I am in the ecosystem of our business is in the sales team, right? So I'm working with these new prospective clients, new prospective customers to understand, is there even an opportunity for us to collaborate in the future? And then I introduce them to the engineering team and am focused on delivering a meaningful result for them and making sure that we're setting expectations. And that's my primary role there. Some really exciting things have been happening at Path, and some of the things that I've really been excited about is how well this has been received in the market. And typically, talking about sales cycle, design teams probably don't care about that, but a sales cycle in this industry, outbound sales, probably 24 months, right? And that's where I was with Design Central and as sales director at Trident. When you're talking about corporations, they have a sales cycle of about 24 months. Recently, these conversations I'm having, we have first contact to a signed contract in about 55 days. So it's very exciting to see that there is such a good fit. And then our empathetic approach up front allows us to make sure that we're working with the right people on their side. So my list, probably not as in depth or as impressive as Mackenzie's was, but this is my journey, and I'm appreciative of the journey that I've had here with my design approach. So as we continue forward with what I want to hopefully give to each of you, some of those learnings that I had and some key points in my career. So as that design manager of Trident Design, as I stepped into the role of president at Trident Design, and then my current role now. So one of the key things that I feel like I remember, and over and over again, I was learning these opportunities for engagement. And what that means for me is, focusing on building relationships with those around me. So I mentioned before, being able to make sure that I have a solid relationship with those that I'm now responsible for, and not make them feel like I'm a boss, right? We have responsibilities. My responsibility is to take care of the team. It's no longer to be a part of the contributor as a practitioner, right? So other things that were effective in proving out engagement is deepening knowledge of responsibilities and accountabilities of those tangential team members, right? So those admin team members, the operations team members, the sales team members that need things from us and that we need things from, making sure that I have an understanding of what they are being measured by and what they need from us to make sure that they are successful. And then the last thing that I would want to make sure that I communicate for everyone is to, of course, go above and beyond your job title, but also under your job title, because the title really doesn't mean anything. And being somebody who comes from a service-based leadership, sweeping floors, filing the paperwork at the end of the year. These are things that are not below you. These are things that you can add value, and it's a meaningful experience for you to learn when you're able to do those things. Those are primarily those key learnings that I had while running the design team there at Trident. And if we look forward to when I was the president of Trident, there's a term that I use and some other folks that I know use called enrollment. So this is a key piece of understanding, find out for those around you or those that you're responsible for, find out what lights them up, right? What is it that they're really excited about? Also find out what really pisses them off. Because if you can understand those two tangents, or not tangents, but ends of the spectrum, then you can really understand how to be meaningfully supportive in what they need to accomplish. And then also finding alignment between your goals and their goals, right? So they have a vision for their career, their life, their way to add value. You have yours. There has to be some ways that those connect, and you have to find those so that you can build those alliances, build those coalitions, and then you know exactly who to go to when you do want some support on certain areas of your vision. And then also inviting others that are either your responsibility or you still work and report to, invite them to take big risks. Right. So, finding ways for them to step out into maybe beyond their comfort zone. I'm sure that Kat, Monica, Romina, Corey, all these people that I've worked with in the past, they would probably say that's one of the things they remember about Chris is I'm a cheerleader. I want them to take big risks. And I also am there to support when they are going to do those things. And then that builds this kind of back and forth relationship that when you want to take big risks, others are there to be ready to help you in that journey as well. And so, as I move forward into that next role that I want to talk about, Mackenzie touched on this as well, empathy. Empathy is one of those things that folks with industrial design degree backgrounds have a special skill set to really lean into. We have qualitative research methodology under our belt. We have an understanding of, being that distiller, that problem solver, that storyteller, right? So our job as a designer is to tell a story and then design a product or a service that tells its own story without having to have a whole lot of stickers or supporting material or instruction manuals. That's our job, right? And the ways that we can accomplish that is through our skills of empathy, right? So putting ourselves in the emotional space of those that we're talking to. And in the way that I'm doing that with my account executive role at Path, I'm talking to folks that are in manufacturing industries that have been left behind, and it's not intentional, right? So these folks are in an area that's called high mix, low volume manufacturing. So they make a lot of different things and they make very few of those things. So they're not tier one automotive, they're not Honda, they're not Ford, and they're not any of those supporting plants that serve those. So as far as robotics and welding and robotics is concerned, they don't have a solution that fits them. Path Robotics developed one that's fully autonomous and allows them to operate with this as though it is one of their labor employees. So eliminating any of that conflict there. So making sure that I have an empathetic understanding of where that person sits in their journey as a CEO, as a director of ops, as a person responsible for continuous improvement. I have to understand where they come from, what kind of personality that they are, and what is it that we can find as those common goals between myself and this person that we can build this coalition to drive the rest of that process together. Some other things on empathy, Mackenzie brought up acronyms. So OKRs is one that is blowing up everywhere. I don't know if everyone here has heard of those, but it's objectives and key results. So each VP, each department is assigned OKRs. A lot of times there's friction between those. So making sure that you have a way of playing nice in that friction, pushing on those boundaries, pushing on that process, making sure that you can still achieve what you want to do, even though it goes against the OKRs that somebody else has been assigned, right? So there's tech push from the engineering team. They want to push the technology that they've developed. There's the market pull from the sales and marketing team. We want to serve what it is that our contacts at these prospective client or prospective customer locations are asking for. So can we give them what they're asking for? No, not right now. Well, what else could we do that gives them what they need, and then find that common ground? And then the last piece, I guess I'll say in this role is, if available to you, and it's something I did many years ago, and it's not what I'm doing right now, but take an emotional intelligence training. Build up those skill sets as much as you've built up your sketching, your graphic design skill sets. Building up your emotional intelligence and communication skills is very key for what I feel like has been successful. And the last thing that I guess I should also comment on is that experience I had as a business owner with my wife, right? So number one, enrollment and empathy are both present for me there, right? Number one, I learned is that crowdfunding is a bank account. So we ran a crowdfunding campaign to launch this. People don't just put money in there because it exists. It's a bank account. You have to go find ways to ask them to put it in there. You say, hey, listen, while we're on the phone, it is super sales. Can you go ahead, go on our website, log in, select that thing, hit go. Did it work? Okay, great. I'm going to call the next person. So that's something I learned that I was not expecting when stepping into crowdfunding. And then also collaborating with other small businesses. So finding vendors for the snack items that are local, that can provide those gluten-free options that we would need for that special needs audience that we were working with. And then also lastly, know when to let go of a perfect idea. So we had this award-winning, literally my wife won pitch competitions for her business plan. This was a beautiful, solid business plan. It was not perfect for us. It was not perfect for us going into a pandemic where all these areas were going to be hit hard. So we were actually lucky that we decided to let go of that dream. But it was hard. We pushed way harder than we probably should have. But I bet a lot of you have felt that in any project that you've been involved in. So, I'm sure I've gone over time, but the last thing I want to make sure that I've communicated are those three things that really support in your ability to work with cross-functional teams is engagement, enrollment, and empathy. And I'm sure that we'll follow up. I didn't put any of my contact information here, but I bet that the IDSA team will send out my email for anybody that wants to contact me after this. But thank you all for listening. And up next will be Leah.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. Really struck home with the whole empathetic approach, because that is something that we were taught from the get-go, is having that empathy, understanding who you're working with, who your users are, and applying that to your business partners, everybody you're collaborating with. So you're really bridging that theory into practice. So that was a great approach, and thank you so much for your presentation. We will be sure to send out your contact information as a follow-up. So. All right, and last but not least, Leah Stewart. We have her from Newell Brands.
Okay, let me get the screen going here. All right, I think we're all good. Awesome. Well, I have to say that an unexpected outcome of joining this talk is that I think I just made two really good friends that understand me probably as a parent. Happy Mother's Day early, Mackenzie, as a people manager, and as someone who spends their days asking a lot of questions and memorizing acronyms. So that's awesome that you might hear some overlaps and some common themes, but from a different point of view, as I am a senior manager of industrial design at Newell Brands. So as a big company, I work in the baby division. So you're going to see from a perspective of someone who is working as a core industrial designer. Okay. So I want to start with some of the real basics first, as I get this question sometimes about just what are businesses, what do they do, who are they accountable for? So I'm going to oversimplify it just to start. So For example, you could have a public company. So that would be like Newell Brands, that we are accountable to shareholders. So there really isn't any owners. I had someone ask me once, like, is Newell Brands an American company? Does it have American owners? Well, it has a lot of owners. It has every owner that has been a shareholder. Something just happened on my screen. If I can't see the chat anymore, somebody holler if it's not working right. Okay, cool. So next up, private companies. So this would be any company that has one or more owners. So just like the coffee shop only had 2 owners, right? That still is a private company. Or you could be a very, very large company and be a private company. You could be a nonprofit, and then you don't really have owners. So you're only accountable to yourselves and your own goals. And lastly, governments are businesses too that are accountable to citizens. So designers can work in any of these kinds of environments. And our job is really the same, no matter what kind of company or business you're working in. And that is to bring value to their audience. So I'm using the word audience here. We've heard, users, consumers, they all mean the same thing. And it's just a broader term for who you're bringing value to. So let's unpack this word first, value. Value. So how do we measure that? And Mackenzie was talking about this too with her diagram of the 3 circles overlapping. Like how do you know when you've hit that sweet spot of the user, the business, the technical? Well, I've worked for quite a lot of different companies that have had all kinds of, in all those spaces, right? Public, private, etc. And there's a million different ways of how they measure. A couple examples here, both in the worlds of what I would call tangible value and intangible value. So in the world of tangible is probably what you're most familiar with. So this could be things like how much market share your company has. So in an example in my world, okay, we make baby strollers. How many strollers do we sell out of the entire world of strollers? Out of everybody's strollers, that would be our market share. Revenue, that's just how much money we make at the end of the day. Reviews is an interesting one too. Of course, in the world of e-commerce, who doesn't look at a review before you are going to purchase something? So it's meaningful. And here's an interesting one. This is from a company that I worked at a while back. We were measured on vitality, which was the revenue from products that launched within the past 3 years. So that was purposeful to say, hey, is your innovation working? Is your innovation growing revenue? So, there's many more. These are just a few examples of how designers can be measured. But I think there's inherent issues with this, that all of these things are based on the past. So even that example I gave of revenue, vitality, like revenue from the past 3 years, how long ago was it that you actually designed that thing to then have revenue from it? It was a very long time ago. Maybe you're even being measured on something that you didn't design, or, is really hard to attribute just to you or just to your design group. What about the packaging? What about the advertising? What about, did they price it right? So there's so many things that can attribute to these tangible values that it's really hard to put them just on accountability for design. So let's talk about the intangible values. And I want to start by giving you just an overview of some of the intangible values that we bring in our design group at Newell Brands. Awesome. So hopefully a lot of that is familiar. That is, what you went to design school for. It's the kind of things that you do every day. But like Mackenzie was saying, it's not always understood. Our cross-functional partners don't necessarily understand what we do, or that all of these intangible things that are hard to measure, bring a lot of value, right? And sometimes it doesn't even make sense to measure them. If I say ideating, for example, is it better if I have 500 ideas versus 100? Not always, right? So it's really hard to put numbers, metrics, data to this kind of intangible value. Here's another intangible value that we're all really familiar with. This is what you guys do, and what you're trained to do is to partner. So you partner with other creative people. Like in these examples here, we're partnering with people who are specialists in CFM and in usability and in craftsmanship and graphic design. But you're also partnering with your cross-functional teams. And that ability to partner, that ability to facilitate, to ask the right questions, that brings a lot of intangible value. So these things are probably familiar. They're probably what you've been trained to do. I want to tell you how it takes even more than that. Things that you probably have not heard in school or might not be obvious to you in your company of how you are bringing intangible value or how the company is bringing intangible value. So another example here is how the company itself making connections between the business and the teams. And so like Mackenzie's diagram of all the goals at the top coming down to all the core teams, that brings value. That your design team can understand the position of the company, the mission, the vision, the context of where we're at financially. All of that means a lot. I have worked at companies where I'm not sure I knew the CEO's name. They maybe never spoke to the broader company, definitely never spoke to design. And there's a disconnect. If your group doesn't really have an understanding of the broader company's goals, it's going to show. And the company also has to connect outward. So for example, with a company with this many brands and all these things that we do, our company needs to be publicly showing how we're being responsible. We are focusing on human rights, and our culture is to volunteer and to give back. And what are all of our brands doing around that? That we're connecting to our communities outward as well as inward. So it's very important. And it is all reflected in your design culture. So for a team to really feel like a family is important, especially when it comes to design. It's so that you can grow in your togetherness of each other. It's going to make your project work better. It's going to make everyone feel more appreciated. You're going to learn more, and it's going to be more fun. And it's really important to have that kind of culture within a company because it is reflected back in the value that you bring to the business. Go even further, diversity and inclusion. I am very proud that my company has, in the past few years, really become more inclusive, enabling more voices, supporting all kinds of communities, and bringing inclusivity and equity. Example here is a talk I did last fall with one of my coworkers where we jointly discussed how to be a better ally to women. As we all know, women in industrial design we're a minority. So we're a very small part of the total industrial design community if you look at industry. So we have community groups where people can be supportive of each other, whether that's based on your ethnicity or your sexual preference or other things. So why, you're thinking like, why do all these intangible, why do we have to have this as part of a business? Well, it reflects back on that audience. If you've ever been into a restaurant or a store and you can tell that the employees are unhappy, that the vibe comes through, that company culture, all of these intangible values comes through to your audience. And if you have all of these things working well, it's going to come through to your audience in a good way. So I'm going to give you an example through a project. A couple years ago, we acquired the brand Nook, and in their current lineup looked a little bit like this. So it's tableware for children, it's pretty dated, and they had lost significant value in the market. Nook is a brand, if you aren't a parent, we make like bottles, pacifiers, feeding tools, and it's global, so it's worldwide. So we took this approach of, reinventing this tableware to update it, and it turned out like this. And I'm so proud. This is amazing. Like, look at the difference between where we started and where we did. It's just gorgeous. But we did it by using all of those values. So here's some tangible values. So innovation for children learning to eat. We had 2 new utensils, one that's like a fork that you learn to use before a fork, and another that is the precursor to a spoon. So bringing innovation that you can, we patented it, so it's tangible for this category. Another tangible value example, being able to design for cost. So example here is this plate and the bowl have suction feet on them. So coming up with different executions of that will be feasible, that will work at cost, that will meet the user needs. Like, all those things can be measured. But some things are, all these things can be measured: the growth of the brand, how much it's grown, did we hit it on time, etc. But what about all those intangible values? Well, how about how we all got together as a team to ideate? That we included lots of voices, and you can see all these little Post-it notes here about how we critiqued and we gave feedback and we heard each other and we listened. All of that reflects in the design work. And how about when we met with our cross-functional teams and we proposed and we listened and we thought about that question that Mackenzie was talking about, what's in it for them? And we answered those questions and we had those discussions and we valued each other's viewpoints and understood the business context. And how about when we thought, what's in it for them? When we looked at our audience, when we talked to parents, when we went to daycares, when we had children come into our office and we watched them eat. That's my son on the lower right there, who was 15 months at the time. So we even volunteered our own children to be a part of this, and went to retail stores, having empathy. That's your audience too. Understanding what their context is, what's in it for them. And the intangible value of aesthetic sensibility, of meaningful choices on our aesthetics. For example, over here on the right, this blooming silhouette of the bowl that represents the growth of the child development with this soft blooming gesture, and the similar gestures on all of these parts that relate them together and give you a cue, as Chris was saying, without lots of tags and instruction, that's where you lift and that's where you grab. So bringing it all together of how we're marrying that tangible and that intangible value to deliver product, I'll show you where we landed. Awesome. So huge credit to my team and to all the designers that worked on that. That last video I showed you was put together for internal use. That's not an advertisement. It's something that we use to show that tangible and intangible value to our own teams. So that's it from me. I will pass it back and we can do some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Leah. Wow, that was amazing. That design was awesome. I was just in awe of the innovation of that fork. Just it makes so much sense. And overall, just talking about both the tangible and intangible values, how that is so important. That what we do as designers, some of it is you just can't measure it. We do so much, and we like to collaborate. We always are promoting for collaboration with not just our inner team, but with the company at large. So thank you so much. And thank you, Mackenzie and Chris and Leah, all of you as well, for volunteering your time to speak today. So we can open this up now to the Q&A.
And I'm going to go ahead and promote Scott to a panelist. If you give me just one moment. All right, should be good to go.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All
Yep.
right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for those presentations. That was really interesting. Leah, I'm gonna have to get a couple of those new tools. Those seem pretty good. We got twin 11-month-olds who will be excited for them. So everybody, I've seen some people have been putting questions in the chat or the Q&A. Keep doing that. We got some that came through in the sign up as well. And I guess going to Leah, since you just finished, it seems like those diversity initiatives are pretty important to help build those intangibles. If you work at a small company that doesn't have diversity initiatives that have been established, do you have any advice on how to get something like that started?
Yeah, sure. So small or big company, I think you're always looking for somebody to start a conversation and a supportive community with. So I'll use the example even at our company. We started the Ray group, so the one that's for supporting women within Newell from design. So we started just by getting groups together to have conversations. So even if you don't have like-minded people maybe in your design group, look outside your design group. And there could be other people to have conversations with that's supporting in whatever realm you want to talk about. So I'd start there to find some other people that are like-minded to form your own community. And then if you want to reach out from that, you're really trying to build awareness. You're trying to build awareness that of whatever your cause is or whatever the diversity you want to be more diverse. So there could be a share of information. Hey, I went to this conference or I read this article, and discussions around that, and kind of offering up the invitations for discussions.
Very good. Yeah, that's good advice. And I guess going to Chris, there was a question about startups. So it seems like you've worked with some startups. Do you have any advice in working with them, and then how fundraising can shape what the designer needs to do?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So before I go into that, I did want to build on what Leah was talking about with allyship. I mean, something that I read this week was, our Madam Vice President Harris, in every meeting that she's been a part of, asked the question, who isn't here? And we should always ask ourselves that question at the beginning of each meeting. So having just an attitude of that helps those small businesses to start building out those conversations. Being a part of the the board of directors at IDSA and working under leadership like Megan and Chin, great leaders asking those questions, right? So what are some ways that we can build a sustainable approach to adding diversity that's not shoehorning it in, right? So those are things that I would like to add on that. And it is very important to focus on how do we, or even Midwestern white males like me, how do I backfill with powerful women in every role that I leave? If possible, that's been my goal as well. But to answer the specific question to me, the ways that design has been important for startups that I've worked with is, I use the word distillation, right, or storytelling. You really have to focus on those two pieces when designing in a startup environment. It is short budgets, short timelines. Mackenzie mentioned it before. It's not an opportunity to find the ultimate product. We get to find the perfect solution for what is achievable so that, is it Michael DeTullo, real designers ship, right? So it's what's achievable, what's possible, and what gets all of the communication across for that product is incredibly important for designers in that environment. And crowdfunding and fundraising, it is getting to that next checkpoint, right? So, Mackenzie brought up racing and a lot of times it's just, you just focus on that next checkpoint, focus on that next turn, instead of having to run through your head the whole process, because, like being a parent, and anybody on the call or listening that is a parent, it's very intimidating to start thinking about, well, when they're teenagers, what am I going to do? And it's like, well, that's not what I'm doing. What I'm doing right now is raising a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. So focus on that and get them to that next milestone. So those are the things that come up for me when I ask that question. Thanks, Scott.
And feel free, anyone else, if you have anything to add, that question or future questions. But coming to Mackenzie, do you have any, I got a couple of questions there similar. So one asking about how do you convey ROI of design to cross-functional partners, or said a little bit differently, how do you convince leadership of the value of design when working on the business side of things?
My first word of advice is patience. So it might take a lot of time, but it's absolutely doable. I'll say I spent at least a year in meetings with the CMO, the board at Nationwide, and all kinds of leaders to prove to them, to educate them on customer experience and why design plays a role in that. And it took a lot of storytelling. I mean, it comes back to storytelling, but it is, understanding what is it that they care about? How is my story and my encouragement of we need to do this, or you need to care about this? Why does it matter? How is it going to impact these goals or this mission that we have? We're customer-centric company, so it makes sense. I mean, customers in our mission, but break that down. And it really took it takes a lot of using examples, whether that is, very specific examples from Forrester articles. Right now, actually, now being 2021, there are many more examples, real world examples of where design has impacted business. There are clear numbers now. There are things that talk about, you by doing X, Y, and Z, you can increase customer satisfaction by X%. And a lot of businesses are really intrigued and influenced by customer satisfaction. And so it's really trying to understand what are the things that will resonate and continue to tell the story. And again, you might have to tell it in a different way. So it's finding your examples, telling your story. And the other thing I would say is find your design evangelists or your advocates within the company who can also help you do that. That might be past clients who you've had a successful project with, or it is somebody who really believes in what your team does. They can help do that. They can be the ones in their meetings with their leaders asking questions differently. I kind of always have thought to myself, if I can impact another leader, a client, somebody in a different part of a meeting or a different part of the company to think differently or ask a question a little bit differently or think about design one time a little bit earlier, then you're starting to make a difference. And sometimes you start there.
Yeah. And you touch on some things that I've heard before of now that there is some data and research on design's impact and being able to kind of speak the language of business when talking about design. But I'd be curious to hear, Leah, it almost sounded like when you were talking about the intangibles, it was almost going the other way of, these intangibles by their very nature are hard to put into numbers and, like the language of business. So is it kind of going the other way of, instead of translating design into business, is it trying to translate business mindsets and teach them how to speak design by advocating for these intangibles?
I don't know so far to say you need to teach the company to speak design. As I think you have to imagine, what if they never get it? What if they never get us? How else? I saw a question in the chat too of like, if you're an in-house team, how do you advance, right? Or what do you do to grow the team? And I really like this idea Mackenzie said of find some advocates or someone that can tell your story when you're not in the room. And when I say tell your story, say, hey, did you see the design team did this amazing project? They helped us solve XYZ goal or challenge. You want people telling stories about your team and what you can do. You need to demo all the kinds of things that you can do because they don't know inherently the things you can do. They don't know necessarily that we can do strategy and we're not just stylists, that we can do that too, but we're not just stylists. Because we don't necessarily need everyone else in the company to know that. That would take a lot of effort to like train everyone, but to have a couple advocates telling your story would really help.
I'll add to that quickly. In the past, I totally agree of giving tools to others, maybe to help them tell our story. We kind of changed the deliverables. So instead of, maybe a report or maybe a workshop, we created a magazine as a deliverable that they could carry around. And, it had the research, it had some of the business reasoning, which did have some numbers, like let's reduce calls to the call center because it costs X amount of dollars, putting it to something, but it had concepts, it had sketches, it had customer feedback. And it was a magazine they carried around and they were excited to show their leaders and they're excited to have, with their computer in their next meeting. So kind of giving them something to show and to help be your evangelist is one way to think of it.
Yeah.
Already saying you're really good at something. Like if they really need amazing images to take to their customer line reviews, like be that resource, be always the people giving them the amazing images to take their customer line reviews. Like don't be upset if we can do more than that. And you slowly will show them that you can do more, right. But always be their go-to. You don't want them outsourcing the things that they valued of you.
Right. I mean, I want 100% exactly what you guys were just saying, and to build on that, backing what I was saying about building advocacy and building a coalition, each of those key members of different groups that you're working with and collaborating with, they're only going to need a certain spectrum of your skill sets ever. So just, like Leah was saying, continue to support them with those. You have other ones, and you can find ways to communicate with the, C-suite for what they would need from you. But the, folks over in quality are going to have a different need from you. And so are there ways to quickly identify those common goals and those common ways that you can support each other? That's the most important piece, whether you're in consultancy or in a small or I'm sorry, a large corporate organization. Those are the things that's really important for building success in those cross-functional teams.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It kind of reminds me of another question, and also, Mackenzie, when you were talking there about products, being defined, and then kind of given to you. When in design school, I think we get used to kind of playing the role of the inventor, like coming up with these ideas for new products, and then you come into the real world, and it turns out the idea for the new product happened elsewhere, and you maybe don't get to work on the project until 6 months after that decision was made. But have you found, I guess, ways in which some companies are structured that allows design team members to have a part in identifying business goals and product definitions?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's, oh, sorry. Is that me? I don't know. That is changing. And there are companies that, for example, we created a separate experience strategy team that wasn't necessarily about designing a thing or delivering on a thing, but it was, how do we help define the strategy with keeping an experience and a customer experience in mind? And eventually that team moved into a larger strategy team. Or there are innovation teams that are now popping up because innovation is the new thing, the new word. And so there are innovation departments and business units, and they are also looking at things a little bit differently. They're taking a little bit different of approach, where it is, let's come up with an idea and let's do it quickly and let's fail a lot, maybe, which is great. But the reality is not everyone can be on those teams. So there are places where that is happening. I think too, it's a little bit of, I don't want to say like working your way up to it, but recognizing that you might be on a team first that is delivering the work. And that's okay, because you are delivering the work. That's still a great thing. It's still going out. It's being a thing. And the more you build the relationships and the more you show that you're asking questions a little bit differently, or you're thinking broader, or you're interested in driving some of the upfront strategy or direction, you'll get there. It's very, very difficult, I would say, to join a team, probably, right out of school, in those spaces, because they are typically looking for experience, but those roles are happening more.
Very good. A couple more questions. And I guess you mentioned not everybody can be on the same team. I guess, how do you manage, the balance, so power when decisions are meeting, sorry, say that again, decision making in meetings where there are, too many cooks in the kitchen, per se, so how do you manage that situation where you've kind of put too many people on this team and in this meeting to try to accomplish a goal?
I guess you didn't ask for me to say anything, so it's, of course,
I asked for everyone.
Yeah, sure, but the thing that you can ask is, okay, everyone, so it seems like we have a lot of great team members involved in this conversation. One of our goals this week or this meeting gets to be, how do we find that core group that's going to continue this forward, and then make sure that we have a communication system built that allows for transparency, visibility, and input to those key people. So, I'm sure many people that have worked in small businesses like mine, if you've got a website design committee, boy, there's a lot of folks that want to be involved in that and add value to that. So you can start with a few large group meetings and then be transparent and open early in the meetings, or say, hey, listen, we've discovered that this is maybe a bit more voices than we need in these follow-up meetings. So we're going to take this into a virtual setting, and then there will be some key people who are responsible and accountable for this result, and they will be the ones that continue it forward. That's all great to say when you're in charge. I get that. So when you're not the one in charge, you can present all of that as questions. Would it be something that makes sense for us to do it this way? Or, I notice there's a lot of folks in the room. Does anybody have ideas on how we can start finding ways to make this a little bit more effective and efficient?
It's interesting. I like this suggestion. I may have to use this one more often, of like finding the decision makers and let them go away. My head was in another place, that I feel like sometimes when you have a lot of people in the room and you're not getting consensus, it's because there's several people that have different ideas of what the filter is for success. So even if they're on the same team, let's say it's like 3 marketing people are in the room, but they haven't aligned amongst themselves what they think of as success, or there's new information that has come in that hasn't been discussed yet. That's like their mental filter for success. So kind of starting there of like, all right, let's go over again what we talked about at the beginning of what means success for this design or this concept, and kind of going back over that and talking through it. Is there anything new? Is there new context? That can usually drive you towards common decisions and common goals, at least facilitate the conversation.
I'll say a lot of time now especially because I'm spending a lot of time in spreadsheets and timelines and estimates, but bringing the discussion to a point of, okay, so when do we think we'll have a decision or a direction? Because it's going to impact, if we don't have a decision by Friday, or if we don't have clear direction by Friday, all of this is pushing out. Or, we need to know X, Y, and Z. So you guys can go back and figure it out, but we need to know, or it's going to impact cost in this way or something. A lot of time that gets them moving.
You can tell it might be based on some people's thinking style too. It's not always that they don't want to include you in the conversation. It's that some people really do need time to go back and reflect, and they don't have decision in their own mind or a point of view in their own mind right now. Like, you just presented all your design work, and you'll believe them when they say they need to go away and think about it, but maybe purposely, like Mackenzie said, book another meeting 2 days later.
Mm-hmm.
It gave you a chance to think about it. Or
and
now we're going to have the discussion.
Having a good brief, product definition or brief make a lot of sense here in helping clarify.
I see that question. Both yes and no. I think a good brief is great, but no real direction or plan comes together without a conversation, and maybe multiple conversations. So great to have a good brief, but there's typically always something that gets uncovered that wasn't documented in the brief through maybe a series of conversations before any work is committed to or a plan or timeline is together. So I would say don't rely on the brief only.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, we're
to add to that. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say to add to that real quick. Rework. I don't know if you guys have read that book, but they talk about proposals and briefs are a best guess. So, it's that opportunity of this is what we think is going to happen. And so that could be the way it comes out, but, is all has to start. So you've designed everything and then you have to start executing it in the process. And that's when you start actually discovering, like Mackenzie was saying, what actually is going to start happening. So I'll shut up now and let's wrap up this conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, we are, I guess, 2 minutes over time. I guess there was one last question that was asked twice, so I'll just ask it of corporate versus consultancy. If you have just any last quick thoughts, I guess they asked what you like best, but I guess I'll also say, are there significant differences in how you approach business, consultancy versus corporate?
Chris, you can go first. Or
Sure.
I have lots of thoughts on this. So
I do too. So, but I think that the key is those common threads that we've said in all of our talks today is that, having an empathetic approach is going to work no matter which group you're in. Working to find common ground, working to find common goals, clear communication up front, even if you are a rock star and you have amazing skill and talent, people hire people they want to work with, and they keep people they want to keep working with. So, those are the things that are successful in either of those areas that I've been involved in. And I don't know what the two of you have to say.
I would agree. Absolutely. I don't think I approach my work any differently. Corporate versus agency. There are obvious things around like different flexibility or, agency life. Those are certainly things. But one of the things I do miss actually from corporate is when you're in corporate, you have a much better understanding of what those company goals are and what these teams are working towards. You can try to dig that out of your clients, and that's what we do by asking all these questions. But you then have a little bit more of an understanding of why they might be asking you for something, because you know where the business is headed, or you know what they're planning to do in 5 years, which in my opinion, in my experience, makes that, it's not easy, but a bit easier from a strategy perspective, to help pull things together, help them make decisions based on research or design, if you're in corporate.
Last thing I'll just add there is that no company is the same. So no consulting firm is like the next consulting firm, or corporate versus the next corporate. They all have different approaches, processes, org structures. So don't make any assumptions that, company A is just like company B or has some of the same challenges.
The last thing I'll add, and I know we're way over time, but if from a new designer or junior designer, an agency is a great place to learn and a great place to get involved in meetings with clients and leaders that you might not have the opportunity to do in a corporate setting.
Very interesting. Well, like you said, we are a couple minutes over time, but thank you so much, all of you, for presenting and sticking around for questions. This was really, really quite informative, and I really enjoyed it. And just a reminder, everybody, we did record this, so we will be sending the link out probably through Eventbrite email. So look for that in the coming days if you want to share or rewatch it. And I think we'll probably be doing this again in I don't know, let's say 6 months or so, because it seemed to go really well. So thank you all again. I don't know if Joanna or Kat, you have anything else to say, but everybody, have a good night.
Yeah, thank you. If there's there's a recommendation for our next event, the topic that you'd like to explore, feel free to shoot any of our chapters an email or a message on Instagram. We'd love to create an event that really meets what the community would like to see. So let us know what you'd like to see next. And thank you all so much for coming tonight. And Joanna, I'll let you close us out.
Thank you all again. I'm just going to quickly share my screen here again, just so you can see here. If you haven't done so already, please follow us on our Instagram pages, Facebook pages, and reach out to us via email as well. We will be sending a follow-up email for you guys so you can contact us directly. And yeah, thank you all. This was a wonderful conversation. Hopefully we can continue it. Please reach out to the presenters, to us. We'll make sure we communicate everything back and forth. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye. Thanks.